나는 동나 생긴 당지 송지자고 뭐 토와서 대체도 나랑 담배 주삼 연바에 상나 그런 송주선 그 지선발.
Predominantly, we should strive after bringing about lasting benefit and welfare for all beings, to establish them in the state of the awakening of complete Buddhahood. That is what should be the attention, the intention from the bottom of our hearts. So with that intention, having brought forth this attitude, we should now endeavor to listen to the instructions. Now, Chakravati continues in his root instructions, saying, whatever emotional defilement is the predominant one, that is the one that needs to be purified. Now, all of us are what is usually termed ordinary sentient beings. That being the case, we all are constantly under the influence of one of the five emotional defilements, or possibly a combination of all of these. Nevertheless, even though all beings find themselves under that influence, there are differences in as far as some might be under the influence of, let's say, anger, and to a lesser extent to other emotional defilements. Others might predominantly find themselves under the influence of desire or of jealousy or whatever it is. Now, we ourselves are very much the judge of what is our predominant obscuration or emotional defilement, and whatever is the strongest one within us, which of course we should know, that is the one that has to be taken care of predominantly. That is the one that we need to work against, that we need to purify.
Yana tene narang lojong mombo gane and it's in a constant songchu samba chimbo into songchu samba uni songchu samba into some nyandra chimbo uyung samba Yona Chendala deji nyandra narang lojong gane and it's in a tige penyana in narang Chendala devo kibo nyandra shokembo yung tendizeri in samba rewa. Chakravati
continues to say, abandon all hope regarding a result or regarding the fruition. This means to say that we should not entertain any hopes whatsoever that through the implementation of the mind training, as we have heard about it, that we will gain fame, influence, possibly even a good livelihood, that we will become influential and that people will venerate us and that we may become objects of respect for others. If we were to proceed to practice mind training with such ideas in mind, then that would definitely very clearly be the wrong attitude to go about this practice in the first place. Similarly, we might entertain the hope that through the practice of mind training in this lifetimes we might become great bodhisattvas, and again that we might be venerated by others, and others might look up to us and think of us in very wonderful terms. All of such ideas that through such practice we will gain personal benefit of this type or of other type, all of that should be entirely discarded. All of such hopes, such ideas should be abandoned from the very outset. Similarly, we might entertain hopes for future lives. We might entertain such ideas that if we were only to practice this mind training in a proper way, then this might result in a positive, joyful future rebirth, such as either in the human realm, or possibly in the god realms, or possibly as a so-called Chakravartin king and universal emperor. If we should entertain any such ideas, any such hopes in the course of our practice of mind training, that would just be an indicator that we still have not abandoned this erroneous idea, this erroneous exaggeration of holding on to that thing which we term self, that non-existent thing which we hold on to so dearly. So in turn, again, also such hopes for future lives, of whatever benefit and gain we might derive of the practice of mind training in future lifetimes, they also ought to be abandoned from the very outset.
Say to Jin Dam Chungbayin, Dot Jin Jin to the Sen Jin Tang Ji and the Galon Song to San Jikayon Mazina. Maran Kona, get it on Maran, Deji to Pechido, and Yon Kansinayon, Zera then Pantu Judge and Woman, Berna Samaran, Tota Java to Kibai. Then the Bangu, Dot Jin Jin gave you.
The next quote by Shakawa Yeshindoji says, "Abandon all types of poisonous foods or nourishments." Well, that we should not eat poisonous foods goes without saying. Now, what does this exactly mean? It means that we should abandon all hankering after possessions, after influence, fame, after circumstances that we deem desirable, that we should abandon them in such a way as to recognize that they are non-existent, that they're not truly there, that they have no self-nature unto themselves in the very first place, and therefore there is nothing to be desired, nothing to be hankered after. And in turn it also again means that we also should give up this erroneous idea of holding on to this self which we hold so dearly, which we protect so vigorously, while there truly is no such self, never has been any self. So anything that has to do with these ideas, the self that has to be pampered in any which way by way of hankering after this or that, possessions, influence, fame or whatnot, all of that is already poisoned, so to speak, from the outset. So that kind of food, that kind of nourishment, we should abandon.
Zombo Madin Jiba, Benda, and you think you get Trobo or Trobo Yone, Tambo Trobo Yanayo, Gela, and do second, nay, so solari. Then it Taring Buri, Zanitel and Revati. Then the Yanayo, then it made young Zombo take that he made an Aranga Trobo in the Ottawa Triangle. That Majiba Triangle. Pete Yando, Maronzona, making a Tulanga, Nepazina. I could not take a long and Nepazis on son, think candy, now Majiba and Segre. That end of what they can, Majiba said you, my. Then I don't Chula Nepazis on Nayon, Paula Nepa Mazi. Chula Sing Nemba, Nena, Paula Nemba, Mana. Then it in the Tela Tenin, Corona. A corona, two thought, Deji Chambo, Yuma, Yendo Chambo, Yuma, then the Cameron de Guri Pindo, some jurt on them as.
Well, the next example that Shakawa Yeshindoji gives is, on the face of it, it sounds a bit weird. It says, do not entertain a positive character. This means that what this example actually means, as it is explained thereafter, is that, for instance, if we were of such a type that we would have many friends, many close ones, and we would keep up very good, positive, friendly relationships with them, and then eventually the time would come for all of our friends to go their own ways, go about their own business, and we might possibly not see such people again for long periods of time, we would always retain a good, a positive, friendly memory of them, even though if we would not see them for long periods of time. Of course, this type of character is perfectly all right, but what we should not give rise to is that if someone harms us in any which way, that if someone causes us distress and brings about pain or suffering for us, then we should not keep up that memory for many years, bearing a grudge against such a person for a long period of time, even though we might not see such a person, we might not see that particular person for a long time, or even though we might not see that person again at all in this lifetime. We should let go of all grudges that we bear against those who have harmed us in any which way in the distant past. So that is the type of, or that at least that's the part of the character that is to be discarded. Rather more, as Rinpoche added, we should entertain positive thoughts for such a person. We should include such a person in our good wishes and our good prayers and wish them all the very best all the time. Another mistake or wrong type of behavior that is to be avoided is to slander others, to talk in a negative way about others. What this means is simply that we should abstain from all talking negatively about other people, particularly when many people have congregated, many people have come together, where we then would start talking about such and such a person and all the wrongdoings and all their shortcomings, etc. That is to be avoided at all times. In particular, if such talk would be a reaction to some distress, some harm that this particular person has caused ourselves. We ourselves are being harmed in any which way by such a person. As a reaction of that, then we now openly let everybody know what we know about their shortcomings, their mistakes, etc. So this is to be doubly avoided. Whereas in turn we should rather do the opposite, but whatever qualities such a person might possess, we should praise them. The next piece of advice by Chakaboyi Shudoji says, do not ambush others, do not lie in ambush, which means to say that we might find ourselves in situations where someone else has harmed us, but at that particular moment we did not know how to reply. We did not have any retort handy whatsoever, but we retain this harm that the other has caused us, or that we think others have caused us, in such a way as to think, just wait, I'll get you sometime. And then wait for an opportunity when we actually can pay back the harm, the distress that the other person has caused us. So figuratively speaking, we should not lie in ambush. We should not retain such harm in such a way as to wait for an opportunity sometime in the future to pay them back in kind. Rather, what we should do again is to, instead of holding a grudge in such people and plotting to pay them back later, we should rather hold ideas of kindness. We should wish them happiness. We should wish them joy and the causes thereof. To act in such ways definitely is the way of cowards. It's the way of people who lack the courage to tackle the situation when it actually happens, and who rather than wait until their prospective victim has weakened in such a way as for themselves to be able to pay them back in kind. This way we're clearly advised how to act, particularly in adverse situations, in adverse circumstances in which others might address us in a harmful way, in which others are seemingly out to hurt us, to bring us pain or distress of whatever sort. Generally speaking, to summarize all of these bits of advice, whatever it is that we might perceive as an adverse circumstance, instead, particularly where people are involved, instead of repaying them in kind, instead of allowing our anger to flare up and to hit back with harsh words or whatever is at our disposal, we should rather train ourselves in making the best of the situation by way of thinking in the best of possible ways of such people, wishing them happiness, wishing them joy, the causes thereof, and not repaying them in any harmful ways in which they might, in which it seems to us that they're addressing us. And the mother Latina, no more talking shit over, say no, and he can mark trouble your ass. And then Mamma, Nesek, Sajala, then now we get, then the other higher, then the second of Bama, teach Chambola, Johnny, and Dana. There are neighbor, Jumbo, to Mamma, Teta, Semna, to Manton, Jito, Chambo, you do. Then we get harm, madame, so much by so get. The next piece of advice says literally, do not strike at the point, which figuratively speaking means if we have knowledge of any person's weak point, so to speak, any particular shortcoming, exactly that we should refrain from pointing out, particularly not in the presence of others, as this might be a painful or possibly humiliating experience for such a person. So from such behavior we should refrain. And under this heading also comes the piece of advice that if, as it literally says, the life mantras of non-humans, of spirits, demons, or whatever one might call them, is known to us, we should not act in such a way through the practices of trustful mantras, etc., as to bring any harm onto them, because also that could cause them distress, pain in any which way. So all this type of, general type of behavior is to be avoided. The next quote says literally, do not shift the load from a dzo to an oxen. A dzo in Tibet is a crossbreed between a yak and a cow. Dzos can be either male or female, and they're known to be extremely strong. They're beasts of burden, and they're used predominantly for carrying large loads. They're much stronger than cows, than oxen are, and so the example is quite clear. One should never shift the load from a dzo onto an oxen, which of course is much weaker and would have a much harder time. Figuratively speaking, this also means that if we ourselves have come into a situation where a certain work, a certain chore has been transferred upon us, has been given to us, it has become our responsibility to do a certain thing, to do a certain work, well, we should do it ourselves. We should not look frantically for someone else that we could move his work onto, so as to avoid to do it ourselves. But we should do whatever it is that we have to do without looking for any substitutes for ourselves who possibly might not be able, who possibly might be greatly distressed by taking over the work that actually is supposed to be ours. So it's 3:30. At 4 o'clock, as Rinpoche has mentioned this morning, we expect Rinpoche to arrive here. Rinpoche would like to call this session to